I have some great HOA stories for you today, and you're going to love that title story too. Here's our first one. Taking on the Homeowners Association President, posted by GFT RGC. This happened when my wife and I first got married. My grandfather had passed just a couple months before and left me a very sizable inheritance with a note to make sure that I use it smartly to start a good life for my wife and I. My father-in-law owns a real estate company that buys foreclosed houses and rehabs them, and he knew of a great starter home for my wife and I, and agreed to pay to have it rehabbed with the understanding that we would pay him back when we were better established, or after 2 years when we sold the house. So we bought the house, and it took about 90 days to rehab it before we moved in. This is an important fact later on. So we finally moved into our house and had been there for about 2 weeks when someone came and knocked on our door, stating that they were the Homeowners Association President and asked for my landlord's contact information. I explained that we didn't rent the home and that we were the owners, and then they followed that up by asking to speak with my parents. I reiterated again that I was the homeowner and asked them what they wanted. They explained that there was a HOA for the neighborhood and that I needed to sign the HOA rules, and I owed $90 prorated for my dues, but they would give me 30 days to pay as a courtesy. However, they needed me to sign the rules right then. I told them that I wanted to read and review them first before I agreed to sign anything, and they were extremely pushy about signing them right then. I refused, and they told me that I had 7 days to sign them and explained that they have legal power to fine me if I do not turn in a signed copy in that time. I called my in-laws because I didn't know anything about HOAs, and I asked them for their advice. My father-in-law got ticked, saying that it should have been disclosed prior to the sale, but sometimes with HUD houses that gets missed. So we agreed that the $30 a month fee wasn't horrible, especially because they did provide a really nice playground for the neighborhood. So I agreed and signed the rules, and there were a couple that seemed a little over the top to me, but I agreed anyway because from my understanding at the time, I really didn't have any choice. It seemed fine enough until about a month passed, and we had a small housewarming party with a couple of friends. Literally, there were less than 8 people there, including my wife and I. The house was small, but it had a nice deck, so we were out back having a small fire using a fire pit that one of our friends had just given us, when I heard someone knocking at the door. No, pounding like a freaking cop. I just went around the house, and there was the HOA president with his car in front of my house with a yellow police light on top. Yes, I am serious. I asked how I could help him, and he very sternly told me that I was in violation of the HOA rules by throwing a party outside of approved hours with a 10 p.m. curfew, and that I needed to send my friends home or quietly take it inside. I checked my watch, and it was 10:05 p.m. I was amazed, but we took it inside regardless. The next day, the very next day, I had a letter from the HOA stating that it was my official warning for violation of the HOA rules by throwing a, and I quote, wild bonfire that was a safety hazard while drinking, and I literally hadn't drank at all. Whatever, I brushed it off and figured it was no big deal. Flash forward 6 to 9 months. We were hosting a teen group devotional for our church one afternoon, and we were playing a game of football in the street. We lived on a connecting street that got virtually no traffic and only had 2 houses on it, ours and the family across from us, whose kids were also playing in the game. All of a sudden, I hear a police siren and see the yellow light flashing. The HOA president gets out and tells us that we have to break it up immediately as it's a safety hazard because one of the kids could get run over. I was fed up with him and told him that they were fine and that we've been watching for cars and that he was literally the first car that we've seen and we had been playing for over an hour at that point. He insists and asks what would happen if an ambulance or a police officer needed to come down that street to save someone's life. This was stupid because literally both streets we were connected to have entrances from the main road. I gave in and we went inside. The next day, I get a letter explaining that I was being fined $60, the maximum fine allowed for a first offense, and that if I wanted to protest it, I could attend the next HOA meeting. I decided I want to protest the fine, but noticed that the fine was due in 30 days, and the next HOA meeting wasn't for 35 days. I opted not to pay until after the hearing and wrote a letter back to the HOA president stating as such. I go to the meeting, and it's literally myself, the HOA president, the HOA secretary, which is the president's wife, the vice president, which is his neighbor, and the treasurer, which is the vice president's wife. My protest was immediately overruled, and I was also charged a $30 late fee for not paying on time, despite notifying him. I was fed up. I couldn't take it any longer, but I realized I really didn't have any recourse. About 4 to 5 months later, we gave birth to our first child, and about a month after that, I was driving home one night. I was working a second job in retail at the time, and my buddy in the military called me. He had been deployed when my daughter was born and was calling to congratulate me. When I got home, I didn't want to risk waking up my sleeping newborn daughter, so I just sat in my car with the engine running as it was a little chilly outside. I sat there for about a half an hour when I heard the police siren and saw the yellow lights. Now, keep in mind, police sirens aren't quiet, and this was right in front of my house. His stupid yellow light was flashing everywhere, including into my daughter's bedroom. I got out of the car and rather rudely told him to turn off the light as to not wake my daughter. He explained that I looked suspicious sitting in my car with it running outside of my house. And I explained the situation, and he told me I had to go inside and that my history of being a troublemaker wouldn't grant me any leniency. I basically told him where I thought he could go and proceeded to sit on the hood of my car. He sat there for another 15 minutes, telling me I needed to go in, and at one point touched my shoulder. I explained to him that if he touched me again, I would take it as a sign of aggression and defend myself, which he responded by getting in his car and leaving. He circled the block about 4 times the next 30 minutes, which was when I got too cold to stay out and finally went inside. The next day, I get a hand-delivered letter from him and the vice president, and he also asked me to step outside to talk about last night's incident. He explains that he was being nice by not calling the police on me after I threatened him, at which point I cut him off and told him that he needed to get off of my property before I called the police on him for trespassing. I read the letter and saw that he was giving me 2 different fines for $180 each, which were the maximum amounts. One for violating curfew and one for disobeying the night watchman. I was done. I had reached my breaking point. This is where the revenge comes in. I start looking into HOA laws and regulations regarding fines and how to protest them because I felt like this was clearly abuse. I find that the law states that you must be notified of an HOA 10 days prior to closing on a house and must be served with the HOA rules within 45 days of purchase, or you are not subject to being forced to participate in the HOA. I remember that we weren't served until after we moved in, which was close to 90 days after we closed. So I called my real estate agent, who is a very close family friend. My in-laws have bought literally thousands of houses from her over the past 35 years, and asked if she had the paperwork still, and she said that she can get me a copy. I looked, and it was over 90 days after purchase that we were notified, and there was no disclosure statement at closing. The realtor says that she must have misplaced it because it's required by law to be provided prior to the sale, and basically that she wouldn't miss something like that because it comes to her when they do a title inspect on the house, whether or not there's a registered HOA. She does a little digging and calls me back 2 days later and says that the neighborhood doesn't have an HOA registered with the city or county, which is required. I end up calling the county office in charge of registering and give them the neighborhood name, and she says that our neighborhood is registered in the other city and not in our city, and that if we wanted to start an HOA, we would have to follow these certain steps, and that without those, the HOA wouldn't be allowed to collect any money or have any authority. Apparently, what had happened was our neighborhood was originally all in one city, but when the city lines changed, the neighborhood was split in half. The other neighborhood kept the HOA that was registered, and our HOA president was supposed to register with the state, but didn't feel like jumping through all the hoops that it required. I was ready to walk down to the president's house and rip it into him, but I decided to be smart for a minute. I talked to my neighbor across the street, who also hated the HOA, and told him what I'd found out. He was furious about it as well. We talked to a few more, and we got a group of about 10 of us together that agree that we need to show up at the next HOA meeting, and word had apparently spread, because there ended up being more people than the library meeting room could host. I had specifically asked to be the speaker for the group, which they were nice enough to let me do. The president tried to prevent me from speaking due to being overdue on my fines, which at this point I'm about 3 weeks late on my last set of fines, with a $30 a week penalty on each fine, so my current bill is set to be about $540. But hey, I spoke anyway. I explained to them that I had contacted my in-law's attorney, also a family friend, who had drafted together a lawsuit regarding the fact that they were impersonating a registered HOA in order to collect money from us, which was fraud. The president dismissed me and said I had no idea what I was talking about and that he had enough of my antics. The staff members all left immediately while the rest of us stayed and talked. A month later, we were served them formally, myself and 20 other homeowners, suing them for all the fines and the HOA dues that we had paid, to the tune of approximately $50,000, as some of these families had been there over 10 years. The president and vice president got their own attorney who attempted to legitimize the HOA, but it required the signature of like 90% of the homeowners. They got 3 signatures, including 2 of themselves, and some other old bitter hag had signed as well. After that failed, they tried to settle by agreeing to abolish the HOA and showed that they hadn't financially gained from it and that all the funds had been used for the park upkeep, the snow removal, and other neighborhood events. We took a vote, and this was turned down in overwhelming fashion. I was surprised I actually voted to accept this. Then about a week later, one of the other families calls and mentions something about the park maintenance and snow removal. Apparently, he had given a quote to do the landscaping for the park, like cutting the grass and mulching and so on, and his quote had been a couple $100 cheaper than what they were paying, and that it had always bothered him because the person that did these jobs was the vice president's son, and that what they were paying him was pretty outrageous in terms of what's standard. Eventually, it went to court, where the judge looked at everything and mandated that they pay $21,000, $1,000 per homeowner, plus attorney and court fees, which were like another $2,000, for a total of $23,000 in damages. Additionally, they were fined by the city's governing body after it was reported. I don't know how much that fine was, though. We ended up selling the house that following summer, but I talked to a couple friends that still lived there about a year after, and they had said that the president and vice president both sold their houses and moved away because they were pretty much hated by everyone in the neighborhood, and that they had an informal HOA that people donated to for upkeep of the park. My neighbor's dumb son gets angry at me for calling the HOA to come to get his dog's mountain of crap that he let pile up in the common area. Wow, posted by Rhombus Butt. I need to vent because this is so ridiculously dumb. My neighbor is a senior lady who is nice, but her son is a bum that just smokes skunk all day in a canopy tent touching my house, doesn't have a job, and is just unpleasant all around. I constantly hear them smoking and drinking often since they moved in, and I hear loud arguments about him being a bum. So yesterday, I was walking and I cut through the wooded common area in front of their house, not their front yard. It was filled with mountains of crap. Old crap that had mold, crap that had turned white, new crap, dark crap, all types of crap. It was so much that I couldn't give a proper footing because every step there was dung. I had to walk around to get to my own house. So I called the HOA to let them know that my neighbors must let their dog just crap in the common area because they never walk it. They said they could not cite them because I have no proof, but they will go clean it. I said fine as long as it's gone. This dumb butt also comes to my door to tell me that they came to clean up the dung that he was going to clean up, and they stopped them. He said that they were writing him up. I said I called for them to clean it, and they told me specifically there would be no citation. I called to confirm, and they said that he was lying and they weren't writing him up, and they were just picking it up for free, and he stopped them for no reason. So I go back there to call him on his junk, and then he starts screaming and cussing, saying that he leaves it there so no kids will walk there, and he was going to do it today. Not even have the decency to lie. His genius plan was to leave disgusting old crap everywhere so kids couldn't walk home through the common area. He is outside so much to watch kids come home from school and complain about it. He then goes off the handle to yell at me cause everyone is complaining about them and not just me. I, again, told him that they were just here to clean the mountain of poop that you purposely left for free. He then said that he could have complained about the groundhogs under my deck, and I said, wait, nobody stopped you. Also, I called the HOA about that problem, and they told me to trap them myself, which I did, and they benefited from it because it was coming through their side of the fence. So, he stopped them from cleaning up mountains of crap that is still there and wasn't going to get a citation. Never walking back there again and getting a big no trespasser sign facing their parking space. What a dummy. I texted his mother saying sorry for overstepping for wanting to clean the mountains of huge dung at no cost to you, but she never responded. Great parenting. An update. She finally texted back this morning. She says that I should have called her before the HOA cleaned that poop area and that there is actually no crap, but her son does let the dog poop all over their yard and he doesn't always get to it. I told her again that it was deep in the tree areas nowhere near her house. And she states that she has to see it herself because her son told her that I said it was the front lawn. Even if I did and I didn't, why do you think it's acceptable to leave piles of old dung in your front yard? I am not responding back now and they are on my crap list. Also, she brought up how I put a cage on her yard to trap groundhogs and didn't tell her. I told her son and he allowed it, and it was to trap them and they were coming from her lawn. I put a cage there for 5 days and I'm the devil now? I told her that I let her put lights on my property so she can see her sidewalk from behind the fence on my house and allowed her to put her trash in front of my house cause the garbage men always ignore her house. Frickin' unbelievable. A final update. Thank you for all your support and advice. I've decided that if she wants to handle her yard and she said that I need to mind my own business on my yard, then that's fair. I have told her to remove her lighting from my fence, to stop placing garbage in front of my house for garbage day, and if her son trespasses again, I'm calling the cops and citing the HOA for each unauthorized visit. Also, I told her to only contact me through the HOA and I blocked her. Snoowords4839 says, I would complain now every day that the crap he laid claim to is still there. And OP says, honestly, I had to talk to 3 crisis hotline workers and my BFF to calm down cause it's the dumbest thing to be screamed at. Old moldy dog crap that was being cleaned up that you stopped? He even told the HOA that it's his crap and now they can cite him if they didn't clean it. Dummy. Crapstomp says, I know it was probably horrible to have to deal with him screaming at you, but now the cat is out of the bag and he will probably treat you badly no matter what. So I would definitely keep calling. This is so screwed up what he's doing. He stopped it from being clean and it's still there. I would be fuming. He's going to be a giant jerk no matter what now, so might as well at least get this fixed and hopefully he leaves. I'm so sorry you're going through this, but you shouldn't have to. And OP says, I never went out of my way to talk to him. I only talked to him like 3 times, and they were letting him know where the pool is, his floodlight being on all night so he could smoke his skunk 24/7, and letting him know that I'll be trapping groundhogs, and if I could put a cage on their side for the week. I am definitely never going to open the door for him or be civil again, because he is one of those men who have nothing but audacity left. I will call and complain, because this is disgusting and it will attract rats and mice. Thank you for your sympathy because this really has made me heated. I know he is probably over it because all he does is drink and smoke. Now, OK Presentation 5329, hilarious comment, says, tell him if he doesn't clean it, the HOA will, or you'll put it in a bag for him and leave it on his front porch. This bag may have holes everywhere after it's dropped, so their porch gets covered in crap. This commenter says, turn off those lights and then quietly put some of the dog poop out there where she'll step in it in the dark. That reminds me of people lighting bags on fire and putting it in front of people's doors full of junk, you know. Sued the HOA. They're taking my guns away illegally. See if the poster wins this lawsuit by clicking the video on your screen. You don't want to miss out, and I'll see you there.